Today's theme is we're back. Dirk's back from being super crook. I'm back from overseas.
What they've essentially said is that gut health isn't a one-fits-all, and that essentially being able to determine an individual's gut health and then be able to, I don't want to use the word medicate, but be able to prescribe an enhancement of that or provide, be able, it needs to be individualised.
Have you followed this whole the cockroach party that's sprung up in India?
No, I have not. This is the first time I hear of it.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your host, Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal Land in Sydney.
And g'day, I'm Dirk Mulder, CEO and founder of the Koala News. I'm coming to you from Durham country, west of Sydney.
Good to see you, Dirk. You're back on your feet almost after a couple of brutal weeks from what I've heard.
Yeah, mate, I've been down with the flu, but that's par for the course, I think, in Sydney at the moment. It seems to be going around. But more importantly, welcome back from France, mate.
I'm also back.
You're back.
Yeah, first day back in the chair a couple of days ago. And I must say, a really nice holiday. And I'm just full of energy and motivation. Just get cracking on things. You know that feeling when you actually have a decent break and like your brain comes back?
No, I don't.
It's the entrepreneur's journey, isn't it? It's just like it never ends, does it?
No, it's good, mate. It's great that you've... And I don't mind saying, I don't know whether this is too soppy or not, but I've missed you.
Oh, big fella.
I know. I have. I don't mind saying it. It's okay.
We did actually put out a news episode. I recorded on the front porch of the terrace of this little place down in the southwest of France. And, mate, it was glorious down there. Summertime in full swing, big blue skies. I was up in the mountains trail running. We were at the beach in the waves. And it gets really warm there. The ocean was 25 degrees or something like that. It was like a bath. Yeah.
Stop it.
How are things in Lake Penrith this morning?
Mate, cold. Yeah, very cold. Off camera, just before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about our mornings, and I don't mind saying Rob took the dogs for a walk this morning and felt that breeze. Mate, out in Penrith, it's a little bit colder. Yeah, it's cool. Not too bad when the sun rises, but it's certainly definitely cool nights, cool mornings at the moment. Very much looking forward to September and October as hopefully it starts warming up.
Yeah, you know what? Coming back to Australia, that feeling of gratitude when you step back into this country, and I woke up the next morning, big blue sky. We're so lucky to be where we are. And actually, a little side story on that before we kick off. But I was down at the local mall, just buying some bread. And I was standing in the queue at Baker's Delight, and a lady in front of me is getting served and the bread's getting sliced up. And I just had this wave of gratitude that just came over me. And I was like, far out. I live in this country where it's a little thing, right? I can walk down, I can go to my local mall. I'm safe. Bread is served fresh every day. Like, it's, in the grand scheme of the world, that is such a privilege. There's a bloke walking past sipping on an espresso, and I was thinking about his espresso and what it tasted like. And this bloke, so lucky to be in this country where he can safely buy an espresso for $8.50. Nothing's perfect. And enjoy his espresso in the morning, wandering through the mall, happy as Larry. I just thought, we are so lucky in this country. Yeah.
We do take a lot for granted, that's for sure.
A lot of gratitude. Anyway, let's get away from that. And since the theme of the morning seems to be we're back, somebody else has been back in Australia in recent weeks, and that's Indian PM Narendra Modi.
Yes, Indian PM Narendra Modi. Mate, what a rock star. What other political head commands that's the word I'm looking for, performance, crowd, rock star? Who can sell out a football stadium? Mate, Modi's got it. It's amazing.
Have you followed this whole the cockroach party that's sprung up in India?
No, I have not. This is the first time I hear of it.
This is fascinating, and look, for listeners who haven't heard of it, it's really worth looking up. So we'll obviously come back to Narendra Modi and what that's led to here in Australia. But essentially, there was a judge that criticised something happened and basically criticised the cockroaches, basically the youth of India who are like cockroaches and not appreciative of this, that, and the other. And this whole thing went ballistic. Some guy put it up on social media, essentially mocking it, and became this instant hit. Like hundreds of millions of people see it. And he's founded a political party off the back of it, called something like the Cockroach Party.
Wow.
And it's become a movement, absolutely worth looking into if you enjoy a little bit of geopolitics. But the establishment in India are a little bit concerned about how fast it's gathered momentum. And of course, India has a youthful population. It's got a huge percentage of its young people, of its population is under the age of 25 or 30. Suddenly you've got this political force that came out of nowhere, millions of people signing up for it, a lot of alarm bells ringing in the halls of power. Don't know to what extent that would have been in the PM's head as he came to visit here, but interesting background.
Mate, political pendulum swinging, I wouldn't believe it.
You wouldn't believe it, would you?
You wouldn't believe it.
So tell us about his visit down here and how that run into international ed, because of course T&E is
Yes.
the big flavour of the last 2 years in terms of government policy, but and India is a big destination, I suppose you'd say, for Australian T&E providers.
Yeah, no, that's right. So, yeah, look, I guess from an international ed perspective, the Education Roundtable coincided with Modi's visit. So Jason Clare chaired that. That's an ongoing commitment that between the Australian and Indian governments, that an Education Roundtable, I think, is held, I want to say every 2 years. I might be wrong with that, but essentially his visit coincided with that. So that was really good. Look, lots of picture opportunities, and we saw that right across social media. Really good to see the Indian government being in that bilateral relationship, possibly more so than other countries. So that's really good. And obviously education's a centre mark of the Indian society and the Indian economy. So really good there. Interestingly enough, visas were probably trying to be pushed down, and T&E was really promoted, as you mentioned, to the point where I think UNSW has just announced their opening of their campus in Bangalore, and UWA has just announced a new partnership as well in India, doing some more remote type stuff. Yeah, lots and lots of activity obviously happening in India in the T&E space, and T&E more broadly. Charles Sturt University has just announced their first class in their new Sri Lankan operation, so that's fantastic for them. But yeah, T&E, mate, flavour of the day, and India being probably the epicenter of that at the moment.
Yes, and lots of stuff going on in that space too, like the IEAA T&E forum just on.
Yep.
And a sellout.
A sellout
sorry,
crowd,
by
yeah.
sellout, I mean it sold out of places, not that they were a sellout. Just clarify that.
Good distinction. Good distinction.
Isn't language, I've just come back from overseas, so my brain's still half processing in French. Like the subtleties of language, and you get the words in the wrong order.
100%, 100%. Yeah, look, I didn't go this year, but I went to the one last year, and it was a great forum. And I think this year, from what I've heard from people, equally as great. And again, it's just T&E is just the flavour of the month at the moment. It seems to be the one area that government, for the want of a better word, I want to use the word unequivocally, are supporting operations in that. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, it surprises me somewhat on that whole social licence thing, where Australian institutions are now investing in campuses and things offshore, but they seem to not be delivering on their social licence domestically. And so I find it really difficult to weigh those things up. As I've said a number of times, T&E done well is a really good thing, but doing it well is a really difficult thing. Again, this is great that Australia is taking education to the world. I really hope, and I have my fingers somewhat crossed behind my back, that in the medium to longer term, these things sustain, and that quality is the number one objective in any T&E operation that is set up, and that these things are, again, sustained over a longer period of time. And this is a really good thing for Australian education.
The landscape over the last 20 years is with some burnt out car wrecks of T&E operations that didn't go as planned, isn't it? So it is an area where obviously an amazing opportunity for impact, but not without risk for both for institutions involved, but also for relationships between countries, for the individuals involved. Like it's a tricky space.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe I'm being overly pessimistic, but when you see the stories in the national media around students not speaking English in class, or an academic maybe helping a student out in a foreign language, and how standards are deteriorating, and there's too many, and transverse that into a T&E operation, and a lot of that stuff would just make sense. The classic stories about international students being passed who might not be there. Now, again, I don't believe there's any evidence of that actually occurring in Australia. And if there is, it's one-offs. We're not talking anywhere near. But you transport that into a T&E context, and the risk, as you say, around those things potentially being greater offshore than what they are onshore, it's there. There's no doubt about it. So being able to put in quality mechanisms and processes to ensure that there's a comparability with Australian education, that's always been the challenge, and it always will. And the different models of T&E also personify that. Having a full bricks and mortar approach offshore where you fully control everything is a really expensive way to do that, but it gives you a lot more control when you then partner with people. Not to say that partners are bad, but there's going to be varying quality of partners when you've got people that are responsible for hiring academics, for hiring the people on the ground, for potentially a lot of the day-to-day quality stuff, there's risk around that. So how you monitor that, how you evolve that sector in a way which, again, comes back to a comparability of Australian education is really important. And again, watch this space, because I think we're going to see some variances of that as we move, and we'll see how that pans out. Again, T&E done well is really good. Doing it well is difficult.
I'll give an analogy. In body language research, they basically say that the further away from the brain part of your body is, your hands and your feet, the more it tells you about what is going on in somebody's mind. So people's feet will often point towards the most powerful person in the room, or what people do with their hands, because it's far from the brain, isn't controlling it as thoroughly, will often give away subtle signals about how people are feeling. So think about you sitting at a meeting and you're tapping your fingers or tapping your feet. It's not conscious. The brain's irritated, it's bored, it's whatever, and it's just giving signals. Maybe TD is a bit like that. The risk is it's far from the mothership, it's far from the brain, and if you're not paying great attention to what's going on out there, that therein lies the risk. Anyway, don't know how I managed to come up with that. That's just
I like
how
it.
my
I like
brain
it.
works.
We're all about quirkiness, mate. I like it.
Quirkiness. So yeah, on to Pi Live, which was last week before, and it's staying with the topic of T&E, visas, and all of that sort of stuff. But we had Home Affairs and the Assistant Minister Julian Hill there talking the talk. Take us through what may have been said in the room, Dirk.
Yeah, so look, Phil Honeywood did a wonderful op-ed for the Koala, where he spoke a little bit about 3 weeks in the sector, and he covered off the gathering on the Gold Coast. So there were 2 representatives from the government, if you want to broadly say that. Matthew Noble, who is from the Department of Home Affairs, and Assistant Minister Hill. They both spoke in different forums. So I think Matthew was part of a panel, and Hill did a sit-down there as well. I don't want to go into 2 things. What I will say is the feedback that I've received, and certainly the view of Phil Honeywood in his op-ed, was that some of the things that were said were not taken very well by the crowd. And I think what that signals is that, by and large, the international education sector and members of it are now starting to get a little bit fed up with some of the stuff that's coming out of the government. And again, I can't say that this is everyone, but certainly there's a growing angst across the sector about what the government's saying publicly and what it's actually doing, and the ramifications and the consequences of that. Even more so the outside of Phil's op-ed. But just yesterday, was it this morning or yesterday, I saw the ABC talking about Tony Burke cancelling a National Press Club address because he's going to be rolling out more changes to visas. Now, this is not so much in the international education space as I'm aware, but this is more about workers and other visa categories, putting caps on working holiday makers. And again, it was cached in the spot of Labor responding to One Nation. So again, a lot of these things seem to be about hitting a number in the nom, as opposed to actually saying what's good for this country and what makes sense, and standing behind what makes sense and putting up an argument for that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next little bit with more, what appears to be more intervention by the government in this immigration space, and how that's perceived by not only the international education sector, but the business lobby and other spaces. I mean, could you imagine the Farmers Federation and seasonal fruit pickers now being capped, and it'll just be mushroomed and mushroomed. I think from an international education sector perspective, this may not be a bad thing for us, because it changes the narrative from it's just about international students to there's other parts of the economy now that are now going to start to be managed, if I can use that word, by the government in a more restrictive manner based on populist opinion around immigration, not based on fact. Again, when we start seeing economic growth being constrained by human resources, the business lobby is going to arc up. When we start seeing that more in subsectors, they're going to arc up. And eventually, when we start seeing that in potentially hospitality, that's going to tail our ability to provide tourism services. So we're just going to see, I think we're going to see the essentially has been going on in international education for the last 2 years, it would appear is now going to start to be rolled out to other sectors. So it'll be interesting to see how that's received and what the response is over the next few weeks.
Interesting to see what those changes are as they're unveiled. Moving on, let's move on to Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, not half a mouthful, TEQSA, for those people who aren't familiar with TEQSA. TEQSA has this sort of regulatory oversight role, but they're opening a consultation around ESOS, off the top of my head?
Mate, yeah, so they've got two consultations that are opening, and what I would say is on the back of what's been going on the last 2 years, there seems to be an ongoing conversation or a continuation of tightening or redoing the rules around a lot of this regulation stuff. And maybe it's not so much around the rules, it's more about how TEQSA oversights and what the responsibilities of providers are. And there's been a number of consultations over the last little bit. There've been a number of changes. Here's two more that are being flagged, and thank you to Tracy Harris for writing this one up. The first one is around transnational education reporting. So if you go back probably 12 months or so, TEQSA indicated that they wanted to play a much larger role in the approval and the monitoring of the T&E programs. So now we're getting down into the grass and into the weeds around what does transnational education reporting look like? So again, more as we move into this T&E space, the government has indicated that it wants to play a role in monitoring how these operations are working. And now TEQSA is saying to the sector, what do you guys think? What are the key elements that we need to be gathering data on? So this is going to be a really interesting one. If you go back 18 months, I don't think anyone in the country knew, or there was no central repository of T&E programs. I remember writing a story probably 12 or so months ago and trying to get data on how many Australian institutions actually have offshore programs. And mate, I've found it really difficult to find anything. So again, just starting at that really top level, but now getting down into the weeds around if you are running a T&E program, what is your reporting responsibility? What does that look like? And what do you need to be getting data on? So that's open at the moment. And the second one is around ESOS registration renewals, as you mentioned. And so again, texts are going out to look at amendments and looking at application periods and seeking feedback as to whether, I guess, further changes should be made to that. So again, more and more, I don't want to use the word impost. There has to be an impost in this space, but I think the red tape, some people that I've spoken to would indicate the red tape is getting larger, not less, and to see how that goes on the back of a potentially declining business model in international education or a managed business model. It just seems to be an operational view that there's not too much leeway or sense of self-determination in this now. You're a part of a bigger system and it's climbing a ladder that is very predefined. And yeah, people are nervous about this stuff.
Like, how much do you reckon Australian organisations spend on compliance with this sort of stuff? Like ballpark. Okay, you must be inside a university. You've got multiple staff members that are just working on compliance in regards to this,
Correct.
right? Let's say you're looking, and not all compliance, of course, because that's vast, but just hear what we're talking about. $500,000 a year, $1 million a year. I don't know. Like it's a fair chunk of change, isn't it?
Easily. I mean, you got to think. I mean, I forget where do you draw the line on compliance, but if you're a university, you're looking at audits, you're looking at all sorts of things, and that's domestic as well as international. Obviously, international now is growing in its compliance regimes. Many institutions have teams of, even just in the international area, have teams of 3, 4, 5. When you think about where does compliance rely on? So if a student has been essentially reported or is put onto a student plan, is that part of the compliance regime? Even though it's a student support mechanism, is that part of compliance? Because it is. Or are we just talking about actually reporting into the government different things? But there's universities with teams of 5, 6, 7 people just in the international office now that look at all of this compliance stuff. They look at their processes around monitoring applications and visas and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's big. It's turned into big coin, and yeah, it's just getting larger. It's not getting smaller. That's for sure.
Yeah, super interesting. Actually, just as you're talking there, I was just thinking about TEQSA, the Tertiary Education Quality Standards Agency, and the new ATEC, Australian Tertiary Education Commission. I was just wondering what the difference was between the two. So quickly, because I'm sure other people, unless you're dealing with this stuff day in, day out, you're like, what are these agencies and what do they do? So just for clarity, TEQSA is Australia's official higher education watchdog, and Gemini reliably tells me they enforce strict quality standards and legal compliance to protect students. Thumbs up. And ATEC acts as the strategic architect, managing sector funding, driving nationwide policy reform. So there you go. If you're curious as to the difference between ATEC and TEQSA, you now know.
And just to confuse matters more, there's a similar body to TEQSA called ASQA, who deal with ASQA, which deals with the vocational education sector.
Australian Skills and Quality Agency, something like that.
That's the one.
Yep. There you go.
Before we move on, I'll just put
And
Before
actually,
before we,
yeah, you go, mate. You go. Over to you.
I was going to say, just before we move on, I just want to mention that those consultations are open at the moment and they close at 5 p.m. on the 14th of August. We've got roughly 10 days or so left to get any feedback into those consultations.
Fantastic. Next Tuesday's big day for the country.
Already.
Let's go straight over the head as to why. Yeah, but Australian
Census.
census is on, mate. Like last census,
Mate, have you received your papers yet? We have received our papers.
Yeah,
We haven't got ours yet, so I don't know what's going on out here in Penrith, but it'll be interesting to get the papers. Hopefully in the next couple of days. I might need to make a phone call if I haven't got them. But yes, mate, Kerry Ramirez contacted me 2-3 days ago and basically just pitched an idea of running a story about a census, and Kerry actually wrote it and I published it verbatim. Really good idea because it slipped my mind completely. But
yeah, definitely.
yeah, you're right. Census next Tuesday. Obviously, as an international student, if you're in the country and you go, oh yeah, that's just for Australian citizens or that's an Australian thing. It's for everyone. What I would say, anyone listening who might work in student support or might work in international education management, I would be getting a note out to all your international students to remind them of census, remind them of, I don't want to say obligations, but remind them to participate, because having a strong data set on international students is really important. And from Kerry's point of view, probably even more important as a data guy. But yeah, this is really important. And again, I think one of those areas where you could quite easily slip through the cracks if you're not attentive or aware of it. I'm good on Kerry for bringing that up and as a reminder, because I think it's super important.
And of course, if you're not super focused on the census and what goes into it and what comes out of it, it is the most important tool, basically, that Australian government has, Australian agency have, in terms of understanding big trends across society, the economy and the like. And it's used in all sorts of ways when it comes to planning and implementing policies and changes. So if we don't have a good data set, then it's very hard to make good decisions. I heard a great thing on the ABC not long ago where they were interviewing people in a town in Western Victoria, big fruit picking seasonal town. And they were saying, oh, this time of year, the town is tiny. It's 2,500, 3,000 people. But when the season is on, the fruit picking season, we're like 4 or 5 times bigger. And of course, the census doesn't capture that because it's just the wrong time of year. So the services that this particular little town in question was receiving was inadequate, essentially, for what they need. So anyway, I've just completely undermined what I just said about it being the most important tool. But no tool is perfect, is it? But this is why international students participating, making sure we're capturing data, does help make good decisions or better decisions.
Absolutely. And for those that do work in the sector and want to put something out, there are census fact sheets available in 25 different languages. They're available at census.abs.gov.au/language-support. So I would encourage you to jump on there and be able to point students in the right direction if they require any additional language support in that census area.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice little CRM campaign out to your international student body, like attaching fact sheets, not just in English, but in home language, mother tongue, just to make it easy for people to understand. Moving on, I'm really glad you put this next one on the run sheet, Dirk. I know we always like to cover a couple of nice good news stories as we're getting towards the end of an episode, but this is good. It's entrepreneurship, Australian technology kicking butt. Take us through, best names for a company anyway, take us through Gut Goose.
Gut Goose, yeah.
Gut Goose.
What if that... I mean, I agree with you. And so I was contacted off the top of my head, I forgot the gentleman's name, but contacted out of something completely different about another story that I wrote from the director of, I want to say Media and Comms, director of, I want to say Media and Comms at USQ or UniSQ.
UniSQ.
Yeah, really nice gentleman. We had a couple of exchanges and said to him, if ever you got any stories, like more than happy to support anything that's out there that's supporting international student success, etc. And he came back to me with this story and I almost fell off my chair because I was like, that is amazing. It's one of those stories that you just don't hear about unless someone's under there propagating it, putting it up in lights. But Gut Goose is essentially a company, that has been put together by a couple of childhood friends, Anis Mishrahi and Leon Mojarabi. One goes to USQ or UniSQ, and I think the other goes to Griffith University. They have essentially, and I hope I get this right, said, Gut Goose, if we talk about our gut flora and our gut health, what they've essentially said is that gut health isn't a one-fits-all. and that essentially being able to determine an individual's gut health and then be able to, I don't want to use the word medicate, but be able to prescribe an enhancement of that or provide, be able, it needs to be individualized. And so Gut Goose was formed. Now, the big one is that they've just, I want to say that they've won a place in what a thing called a Y Combinator.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Y Combinator, which is a Silicon Valley startup accelerator that's helped companies like Airbnb, Dropbox, and OpenAI. And mate, they got in there and there's more than 80,000 applicants to this program. So again, beyond just saying that, what a big deal. This is amazing. And for, I want to say the word kids, for a couple of guys up in Queensland who have an idea, they've probably really focused on that through their studies, their childhood friends, and such a little thing has become potential to become such a big thing. And I just want to say that this is just amazing because it puts a very different spin on probably what everyone would normally think, which is these things are developed through research institutes and then they're spun off into private companies and then venture capitalists come and they, this is just a couple of blokes. They've applied for an accelerator, one of probably the biggest accelerator in the world. You know more about that, Rob, than what I would. And they've got this amazing platform now on an idea that started in Southeast Queensland. It's brilliant.
It's a great idea. They say that your gut microbiome is as unique as your DNA. So literally the combination of bacteria and bugs and stuff in your guts is so unique to you. So when you're crook and you have antibiotics and the like and it wipes everything out and you need to restock, you need something that's customized to you. And yet all of the products on the market are basically one size fits all. It's just something about only going into Kmart to buy a pair of shorts and there's only one pair of shorts on the shelf for everybody.
Stubbies.
They have to be stubbies, wouldn't they? We're in Australia. They'd have to be stubbies, wouldn't they?
Right. And then they're right next to the double pluggers, mate.
We digress. The concept of this is brilliant, right? And to see Australian biotech moving into that space is awesome. You know what I hope, Dirk? I just hope they come home. I hope that there's a uni out there that will tempt them home with support and funding and the like, because all too often these brilliant people end up somewhere else where the money is usually. So good on them.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I'd want to shout out, I've just looked it up. Chris Walker is the gentleman's name from UniSQ. So again, Director of Media and Strategic Communications. Shout out to Chris. Thank you very much for that story. And again, doing everything we can to get that out there and shine a light on it. So thank you.
Actually, I'm just going to plug my other podcast, which is the Future Student podcast. That's exactly the kind of story that I need to get onto that podcast, because those sort of stories inspire people of what's possible. Yeah. So, mental note, I'll chase Chris up and make sure that anything comes my way for that podcast too. But another good news story, and this will wrap us up. Actually, before we get to this, because we can just go straight out afterwards, reminder everyone about AIEC, 40th anniversary this year in Sydney. Getting close, mate, isn't it? It's 2 months out. Yeah, super early birds closed last week, so you've already missed your super early bird, but early bird's still open now. So jump in. I wouldn't half suspect if it's sold out this year, because this is a big deal in Sydney. Always a big turnout in Sydney. Get your tickets now. Please. Because we'd like to see you. We get to talk to you. You hear from us. It'd be great to see you in Sydney. Last story, mate, from refugee to scholar. This is a really nice story. Yeah, take us through.
Mate, this is a killer of a story, I think. So I don't mind saying for many that know me, would know that I'm pretty good mates with Brett Blacker from Duolingo, and Brett and I catch up. Brett was just telling me about this amazing thing that happened through Duolingo, or with Duolingo support, should I say. And I said to him immediately, I said, mate, let's do something with this because it's amazing. And it's the story of a guy called Faizan at background. He was a refugee in India after everything went to pot in Afghanistan. His brother's in Germany. He was He was obviously, as a refugee in India. When you're a refugee, I knew, but I discovered firsthand through chatting with Faisal and subsequent, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, that you're pretty stuck, mate. Like when you're a refugee, you don't have many rights. Your basic needs are probably taken care of, but to be able to work, to be able to do things that we take for granted in a normal society, as a refugee, you just don't have those rights. So he was in India for many years. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he, as I mentioned, his parents were still in Afghanistan. His sister achieving academically really, but obviously post the US withdrawal in Afghanistan, her opportunity, shall we say, were diminished. Yeah, brother Germany, him in India, really bright guy, great sporting wise, and essentially was in India, applied for essentially a humanitarian, for the want of a better word, scholarship, and got an acceptance to Georgetown University in the US, would you believe? Amazing, right? Here's this kid from Afghanistan, been in India, and finally has this amazing olive leaf that he can just grab onto Georgetown. Accepted, starting his movements to actually go to America and take up his offer at Georgetown. And what happens? The US administration cuts down on visa applications, on education. And as we've spoken about in the past, when that happened, was basically told, thanks but no thanks. The US won't be able to give you a visa because he was from Afghanistan, because he was a refugee. So the poor fella, had all of this, had all the hope, all the dream, just to be torn down. In comes and I've got to be careful. I apologise if I get any of the details not exactly right, but in comes another opportunity through, I want to say it's Refugee Alliance Australia or something along those lines, Refugee Education Australia, where there's a program that's been developed with a number of Australian universities where they can accept refugees and they're put onto essentially a domestic kind of cohort. So they're not technically an international student, but they're brought in, looked after, and being essentially given an opportunity to succeed in life where they otherwise would not have. Faisal applied for that and was successful. And fast forward everything, and I don't want to rehash the entire story, but he's now studying at Western Sydney University. The irony through all of this process is he is literally a 5-minute drive around the corner from where I live. So we've caught up for lunch, and it's just such a wonderful story. The guy tried out for his side story. Through the interview, we're talking a little bit around how he enjoys soccer. He's not a bad soccer player, and essentially made it all the way through to the final kind of cut of WSU's uni games team. And he remembers going in there, and essentially the final trial is, all right, anyone who's semi-professional, professional over this side, because Western Sydney University has so many students that might be in the academy for either Sydney or for the Western Sydney Wanderers. And so suddenly this kid from Afghanistan who's been a refugee for the last X amount of years, who's arrived in Australia, is suddenly in the last cut against professional football play. And he did really well to get to the last cut, right? Just so the sub-stories that you hear from interviewing him and sitting with him and having lunch with him and going through all of this is just phenomenal. Without going too much further into it, if you get a chance, log on to the koalanews.com. There's a story there from refugee to scholar. Faizan Atul is the guy's name. Have a read of it. Congratulations to him. He's obviously gone through so much adversity and has really stuck at it, and now has an opportunity in life that probably never ever would have come to fruition. Congratulations to Refugee Education Australia. Congratulations to Duolingo. It's just a bloody great story, Rob.
The mechanism here is called the Australian Refugee Student Settlement Pathway. So
That's
check
the
that
one.
out if you're interested, and certainly if you're interested in supporting it. And mate, maybe just to finish up, my final thought is gratitude. We live in a country that can actually do that, and that does do that. So long may that live and prosper, irrespective of all of the other crap that we're seeing in the news right now. Mate, thank you for keeping us up to date with the news, as always. And listeners, as always, thekoalanews.com is your source of truth for the Australian international education news scene. If you're not subscribed, you must do that. LinkedIn as well for your breaking news. Follow The Koala News on LinkedIn. What's your next movements, mate? Are you anchored in Sydney? You still got to get through the rest of this bug, but then after that, have you got any travel planned or anything else coming up?
Yeah, for the next couple of weeks, I'll be in Sydney, and then I'm actually heading up to the Northern Territory, which will be fun. The end of August, they're having an agent inbound, and that goes along with their sponsorship of the T20 cricket tournament that's up there, going up to hopefully sit down with a few people. Might have another podcast or two for you as well, Rob, which would be good. And then from there, I'll probably head over to Perth, where I've got a little bit of work, and hopefully catch up with a few friends while I'm there.
Sounds good. And next week, I'm at the IEAA Learning Abroad Forum, also in Sydney. That's from the 13th. It's on the 13th and 14th, Thursday and Friday. So it'd be awesome to be catching up with Learning Abroad colleagues there. And so in the next news episode, I'll bring you a bit of a download from everything we go through at the Learning Abroad Forum next week. I'm pumped about that, to be honest, mate. Just get back out and see colleagues in the flesh.
Absolutely.
In Sydney.
In the flesh. Mate, jot down a few notes and we'll make sure we get a story up on it as well.
Sounds good, mate. Okay, until next time, have a great week ahead, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you in the next episode of Global Horizons.
Thanks, Rob.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all of the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garigal land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.